So, this thing happened to me not too long ago, and I still can't wrap my head around it. Let me start from the beginning so you can get the full picture. It all kicked off when I moved into this old apartment in the heart of the city, somewhere around the outskirts of Mexico City. I had just scored this amazing job with a big company, and man, was I stoked about this new chapter in my life. Finally, I'd be raking in enough dough to buy the car I'd been dreaming about for years. The building was ancient, but it had this classy vibe. Thick walls, creaky wooden floors, and that musty old-time smell that, weirdly enough, I kinda liked. It made me feel right at home. But soon, I started sensing something off about the place. The vibe got way heavier at night. On my first night, after unpacking all my stuff, I hit the sack early, dead tired from the move. In the middle of the night, I woke up to this weird noise. It was like someone was calling my name, but I couldn't quite make it out, almost like it was coming from inside my head. I didn't know what to do, so I just looked around, but saw nothing. I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, but the sound wouldn't stop. It was like someone was whispering things I couldn't understand. The next few days were the same. I went to work, tried to stay focused, but I always had this creepy feeling like someone was watching me. When I got home, it got even worse. Every time I walked down the hallway on the third floor, a shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't explain why, but that hallway seriously freaked me out. One day, I decided to chat with my neighbor, Mrs. Marta, a sweet old lady. "Hey, Mrs. Marta, can I ask you something kind of weird?" I said. She smiled and nodded. "Have you ever felt anything strange in this building? Like noises, weird feelings?" "I don't know." She suddenly got serious and said, "Many years ago, a young woman threw herself off the terrace. Nobody knows why, but since then, some people have complained about strange noises and feeling uneasy." That really spooked me. The fact that the building was from the 1920s and had been a fancy hotel added to the creepiness. I found some old news articles about mysterious deaths and accidents there. All of this just fueled my fear, but I had some time to do a bit of digging. One night I decided I had to find out what was going on. I set up a camera in the living room, pointed at the hallway, like in the movies. I went to bed but couldn't sleep a wink, thinking about what the camera might catch. Around 2 a.m. I heard the noises again. I grabbed the camera and went to the hallway. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. When I got to the hallway, I saw something I'll never forget. In the corner, near the stairs, stood a woman with long, tangled hair and pale, almost see-through skin, like a ghost. She had no eyes, just dark holes. I felt an icy chill, and my vision started to blur. The apparition moved closer, and I froze in fear. I closed my eyes and started praying, even though I'm not very religious. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor of my room, curled up and drenched in sweat. I didn't know if it had been a dream. I jumped up quickly, but the camera was right there beside me. I grabbed it and watched the footage, scared out of my mind, and what I saw terrified me. The camera had captured the woman, standing in the hallway, exactly where I'd seen her. She moved in this weird, almost floating way. Suddenly, she turned towards the camera and stared right into it. The next day, I made a quick decision and talked to my boss. "Hey boss, I need to talk. Can I transfer to another city? It's personal, but it's important." He looked surprised but agreed. I knew I couldn't stay there and move to another city. I still dream about that place, like a bad nightmare, but I'm glad I left. I can't sleep without a light on anymore, and any strange noise at night freaks me out. Mrs. Marta called me a while later, just to say more people had left because of something sinister showing up at night. "You weren't the only one, you know. More people are hearing and seeing things," she said, sounding worried. "You should leave, Mrs. Marta," I said, concerned. "Leave before something bad happens to you." She went quiet and hung up. That gave me chills. I called her back, but she didn't answer. Maybe I'll never know the truth about what happened, but one thing's for sure. There are things in this world we can't explain, and sometimes it's best not to try. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying. Now we continue. What happened to me a few years ago made me change my mind about the paranormal. I get a cold shiver just remembering it. I'll tell you everything, right from the start, so it's easy to understand. I had just moved to a small town in the countryside because of a new job. I rented an old, kind of weird house, but it was all I could afford. The street was quiet, with old trees and all, but it had this sort of creepy vibe, you know? The neighbors were nice people, but they kept to themselves. Typical small-town stuff. In the first few days, everything was fine. I was busy with work and getting used to the place. But in the second week, weird things started happening. The first sign was this feeling that I was being watched all the time. When I was at home, especially at night, it felt like someone had their eyes on me. I thought it was just my imagination, but who knows? One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to a scratching noise coming from the hallway. It was a strange sound, kind of creepy, you know? I got up, half dazed, to check it out, but found nothing. I went back to bed, but the noise kept coming back the following nights, always at the same time. I decided I needed to investigate this situation better. On Friday, I decided to stay up to see if I could figure out what it was. When the noise started, I grabbed a flashlight and went to check it out. I was pretty scared, not gonna lie. The sound was coming from the attic, a part of the house I hadn't even explored yet. I climbed the stairs, scared to death. The attic was dark and full of old junk. I saw something move in the dark corner and got really scared. It was an old doll lying on the floor. Its eyes glowed in the dark like a cat's, giving it this weird, disturbing effect. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a low, creepy laugh. I asked who was there, for God's sake, but got no answer. The silence was even more disturbing. "I'm alone in this, right?" I said, feeling a cold chill in my stomach. A shadow moved in the corner, and I was scared stiff. I rushed down the stairs, tripping over everything. When I got to the bottom, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. That's when I ran like crazy to my room and locked the door. Sweating cold, I stayed there in silence, trying to hear if anything else happened, but everything stopped. I eventually fell asleep. The next day, I was already looking for another house to rent. In less than a week, I found a new place and moved out. Nothing else happened, but I knew I had to leave. I left that house behind as fast as I could. There was no way I could live there anymore. I, who always thought ghost stories and hauntings were nonsense, lived through one to understand that sometimes these things are real. When I was 25, I moved back to my parents' house after a tough divorce. It was an old country house, isolated on the edge of a forest near the city. A really quiet place with lots of nature. At night, it was so quiet it was almost scary. My parents had moved to a nearby town and left the house to me because of the divorce. At first, I thought it would be a good change of scenery, a peaceful place to recover. But I soon realized something wasn't right, and it wasn't as calm as it seemed. On the first night, right after I settled in, I heard a noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone walking back and forth. I crept up the stairs slowly. The hallway light flickered, and my heart raced. When I reached the top, I saw that my parents' bedroom door was open. I was sure I had left it closed. I went in, but there was no one there. I decided I must be tired and imagining things. In the following days, the noises continued. Sometimes it was footsteps, other times whispers. Every night, I woke up at 3:15 a.m., always feeling like I was being watched. One night, when I woke up, I saw a shadow in the corner of my room. It was the silhouette of a person, standing still. My body froze with fear. I was paralyzed, unable to scream or move. After a few minutes, the shadow disappeared, and I spent the rest of the night awake with the lights on. I told a friend about what was happening, and he suggested I investigate the house's history at the local library. So I went there and looked up old records. The librarian, who seemed quite interested, maybe in me since I was divorced, helped me out. I discovered that the house was built in the late 19th century and had belonged to a family called Whitaker. One of their sons, named Samuel, had tragically drowned in the lake behind the house at the age of 15. After his death, the family reported paranormal activity. Eventually, the Whitakers moved away, and the house passed through several hands before reaching my family. I decided I needed to know more and returned home determined to solve the mystery, though I was very scared and anxious. That night I made a circle of salt around my bed, a trick I read in one of the library books to repel spirits. I felt a false sense of security as I lay down. At 3:15 a.m., I woke up again. But this time, something was different. I heard footsteps approaching my door. The sound stopped right at the entrance. The door opened slowly, and I saw the same shadow as before. This time, it looked more defined, more solid. I could see the outline of old-fashioned clothes, as if the ghost was dressed in antique attire and looked wet. The ghost entered my room, crossing the salt circle like it wasn't even there. I jumped out of bed and could clearly see the face of a young man, with empty eyes and a sad expression, as if he was asking for help. I was horrified. I tried to speak, but my voice came out in weak, broken whispers. "What do you want?" I asked. The ghost came closer, and I felt an overwhelming sadness. He pointed to the window. I looked and followed his gesture. The young man disappeared as I reached the window. I looked outside and saw the lake where he had drowned. Something compelled me to leave the house and walk to the lake's edge. At that moment, I didn't feel afraid anymore. When I got there, I felt a strong, almost oppressive presence. I looked at the water and, for a moment, thought I saw something moving on the surface. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the water and grabbed my ankle. I tried to pull away, but the grip was incredibly strong. I felt like he wanted to drag me into the lake, but I managed to break free with great effort and ran back to the house. The next morning, I decided it was time to leave that house. I returned to the city and explained to my parents what had happened. When I told them everything, they exchanged a look that made me uneasy. After a pause, my dad sighed deeply and began to speak. "Son, there's something we never told you about that house. When we moved there, your mother and I also experienced strange things. I heard footsteps upstairs when you were at school, doors that closed by themselves and whispers from nowhere. At first, I thought it was just our imagination, but things got worse." My mom continued, her voice trembling. "One night I was alone at home, and I heard someone calling my name. When I went to check, I saw a shadow in the hallway. It was a ghost, I'm sure. It disappeared when I turned on the light. I never told anyone, not even your father, until now. They said they sought help from a medium at the time, who told them that the spirit had suffered a tragedy there and was trapped in the house because of his sudden and tragic death. The medium performed a cleansing ritual to help the soul find peace, but it seems it didn't fully work. My parents said the paranormal activity lessened after the ritual, but never completely stopped. So they decided to move when they had the chance." Hearing this gave me chills. It seemed Samuel's spirit was desperately seeking someone to help him. Maybe he felt I could be that person, or perhaps he was just trying to communicate with whoever was in the house. We sold the house for a price well below the market value, and I moved back with my parents for a while. We sold it quickly, in less than 15 days, and didn't mention anything to the new owners, so they wouldn't back out of the sale. Over time, I tried to forget what happened, but the experience marked me deeply. Occasionally, I still wake up at 3:15 a.m., feeling like I'm being watched. I don't know if it's just the trauma from that night, or if Samuel is still trying to reach someone from the other side. Recently, we received a message from the new owners of the house. They asked if I knew any history about the place because they were experiencing strange events and wanted to understand. I told them what I knew, explained that I didn't mention it before because I thought it was just in my head, and recommended they seek help from a professional. I hope they manage to resolve the situation and that Samuel finds peace. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying.